Hello, class. If you just saw the first half, this is the second half of the lecture. I'm just going to go through, but hopefully a couple little chunks make it more manageable for you. It could be psychological, whatever. But all right, so this last one, we went from eggs, eggs production, and we looked at the ovary and the uterine tubes. So now we'll get to the uterus, and we'll make our way out and do other miscellaneous things we need to do. All right, so the uterus changes amazingly if you think about how huge human gets in pregnancy, right? So it's made of a smooth muscle, and so smooth muscle can go through hyperplasia, meaning the cells divide, unlike skeletal muscle, and they get huge, and the cells themselves get huge, and you end up with this giant pregnant person, right? Be able to hold this 8-pound kid inside of you, right? So let's get there. So on the tubes, do you guys understand? You have one on each side, the uterine tubes. You saw how complex the inner mucosa was. It has little cilia on its way down. And that's where fertilization takes place, in the tube. And the tubes takes about 3 days for that fertilized egg to become a ball of cells and then enter the uterus. And if the uterus is ready, we'll talk about that inner lining of it, that can implant, make a placenta, and then begin the 9 months of growth. All right, so overall, looking at anatomy, the fundus is the top. We'll talk about that with the stomach. Top of it is a fundus. Then you have the body, and then the cervix. And cervix means neck, right? Cervical vertebrae, right? So we'll talk about these 3 parts of the uterus. It's obviously hollow. And in a cadaver, it's about this big. And usually I'm looking at 80, 90-year-old, women here. So it's really regressed quite a bit. They've long been through menopause, but solid, the largest piece of smooth muscle in your body, really, for women. Solid organ. Yeah. You cut it open, you see a little opening in there, but it's just solid, smooth muscle. And then looking at the sagittal section, you can see how it's found between the bladder and the rectum, right there, the vagina, and you see the uterus comes in and the cervix comes in. The vagina will go past it like that. Well, I'll show you that again. There it sits, and again, the vagina comes in and it's going to go. The cervix, we'll show you that's going to be round, a little hole in it there, and then. It's this big, broad ligament. It's kind of tethered deep in your pelvis, again, between the bladder and the rectum, and the uterus sits there. And the layers of it. So the inner layer is the endometrium. And you're all familiar with that because of endometriosis. That's the bloody inner layer that caused so many issues in endometriosis. But it's replaced every month. You're going to see you have a basal layer that stays there, but then you make a new layer of blood and vessels and glands. And then during your period, menstrual cycle, goes away, builds up again. The myometrium is the muscle, smooth muscle, big, thick muscle right there. And the perimetrium is on the outside. So these terms, if I ask you, should be straightforward, right? Endo, myo, peri. Remember the heart, we had endocardium, myocardium, pericardium, right? So same thing. Yeah, and so even the muscle will change through your monthly cycles. It'll thicken and get thinner a little bit. And the hormones, you also maybe feel differences in your breasts and all kinds of things. So these hormones, they're going to affect ovulation, but they also affect other parts of your body as well. Let's see. But you can see this endometrium, there's this dark red inner lining of the uterus, which is refreshed every month normally. Looking at a view of it, you can see the endometrium. Here's this, it's hollow in the middle. And then these are all these glands. They have these deep little caves that go in and lots of blood vessels. And then you can see this darker purple out here is the muscle layer, smooth muscle around it. But see, the endometrium is thick. Like I say, whenever I see a really pregnant woman, it's fascinating how it can get so huge, and then go back, yeah. But the smooth muscle cells, they get longer, there's more of them, more connective tissue. So the uterus goes from this big to this big, right? All right, so again, I'm gonna review this stuff a little bit for you. So, I mean, the top one you're looking at, the pituitary hormones, FSH and LH. So follicle stimulating hormone, last lecture I talked about it with men in sperm development, and LH, or luteinizing hormone, peaks and causes ovulation. So there's how the hormones go. And then if you look at the ovary, you can see ovulation occurs when the egg pops out of the ovary when LH peaks. And then you can see that that follicle turns into the corpus luteum, and that's going to be producing progesterone, and that's going to maintain the inner endometrium of your uterus. And if you do not get pregnant, the corpus luteum does not get the signal to survive, and it dies. It turns into this white body, and you can see you're going to go through menstruation, where it's all going to break down, come out, and you're going to start over again. Yeah, so that's what menstruation is. It's going to be that endometrium is going to completely break down, and blood and all the debris is going to just go out the vagina, and then you slowly start making it up again. Again, I may go into a little too much detail here, but basically I want you to know this endometrium has a basal layer that's always there, but this this functional layer is the one that's replaced every month. And so down in the basal layer, you have, you know, some of the glands and the arteries. The arteries are spiral too, and they almost kind of like retract a little bit as that layer sloughs off, the top layer. And once that layer is sloughed off, those glands build up again, and those arteries build up again. Then you destroy it, right? And it comes up again. But you've always got this basal layer here that has the stem cells to make the new functional layer on top. And the idea with all these glands and fluid and blood supply is that if you have an egg, you know, it's gonna, or a zygote, it's gonna implant in it, you have the ability here to make a placenta and to set up a connection there. Ah, beautiful view. Take a look at that. So, so here early on, again, this is all muscle, forget that. But you can see that this layer is building, and up here, look at how thick it is. Yeah, all this thickness, and see all the glands in there, the clear. So it's really building up, building up, building up. And then here, menstruation, you can see blood, and it's all breaking down again. You see all the red is blood. So seems like a lot of work, you know. Every month you menstruate, or you break it down, and then you start over again. You start building it up again. But you do that in preparation for potential pregnancy. It's a view of a uterus, just showing all the blood vessels, just to see how many blood vessels there are. Beautiful. I bet that's right and left uterine artery, right? All right. So yeah, like I say, these arteries in the beginning, they come out, they start straight, but then they get this spiral. What do we call them? The spiral arteries. Yeah, they're gonna like that. And so they're going to go up there, and they even have the ability to kind of pull back a little bit because they kind of tighten the spiral or loosen it up. Here we go. See, spiral artery. Yeah. And so, yeah, all of this is destroyed and rebuilt. And you got to put these things together, you know, what's going on with the ovary and what's going on with the uterus. And you can see as your, imagine this is a monthly cycle. You can see in the middle is going to be your ovulation, day 14. And you can see that endometrium is building up. And it will build up, you know, through ovulation, and it will continue to be up and ready to go in case there's a pregnancy. But if there isn't a pregnancy, it's going to crash. You're going to have menstruation, and that whole inner layer is going to be destroyed, bloody mess, it's gone, and then you come back again. Now, if you get pregnant here, it's going to continue, and this is going to stay big, all right? But normally, if you're not pregnant, it's going to crash, and it's going to happen. So, yeah. Yeah, it's just a beautiful view, seeing these spiral glands and arteries going up through there, just ready to nourish that blastocele, that zygote, that the ball of cells that will become you. Yep, and if you don't get fertilized at the end of the menstrual cycle, corpus luteum degenerates, your hormones go down, and then those arteries, they vasoconstrict, they shut off, killing, you know, all the tissue because there's no oxygen up there. And apoptosis, the cells just kill themselves in that functional layer. The blood supply has been cut off, and you'll feel often menstrual cramps involved and bleeding because you're taking all that endometrial layer, that functional layer, and sending it out. So take a look. This is a ready to go. You can see this nice thick endometrium. You see spiral arteries and glands coming up. And this part is the part that basal part always stays. And this is the part that was just built, brand new. And then here you can see it degenerating. So here's menstruating. You can see there's the mess there, is that all the cells die and blood supply is cut off. All right, but when you hear gravid, it means pregnant, or you have eggs. So if you're gravid, you know, you are carrying a little offspring. And so if that happens, you can see there's hormones given off, that's remember HCG, that are going to go back to the ovary to keep the corpus luteum going, to keep the uterine lining nice and thick. Don't menstruate because we got something going on here. And that's a tricky, really tricky time too. If the signal is wrong, there's not enough HCG, the hormones drop, and that tenuous connection will be lost, and you'll bleed, you know, maybe miscarry, you know, a little kind of thing. So there's a real handoff there with hormones, and it's a tricky point. And so to get pregnant, it's amazing it happens because everything's got to be just right with those hormones. Oh, here we go. I was alluding earlier, a pregnancy that's outside the uterus is called ectopic. Okay. And the reason is, I should say the difference between males and females here is that females actually have a direct connection from the outside world into that abdominal cavity. There's a hole. All right, but think about it, it's pretty hard to get up there because you got to go up the vagina, through the uterus, through the uterine tube, and then you get in there. So you can see it's not like there's a gaping, you know, hole in your side where things can get in. So, but there is a connection there. And what can happen during ovulation is that this egg can pop out of the ovary, but it doesn't get caught in the oviduct, and it can float around your abdominal cavity. And guess what? Those sperm that come up, the sperm end up getting into the abdominal cavity too. And we could have a fertilized egg that can then implant on your intestines or your wall of your many organ up there. And you can have the beginning stages of a placenta and all. You can't carry any child to term unless it's in the uterus. It starts to grow. And so you'll see stories of, you know, they do autopsies of a 80-year-old woman, and they find little remnants of where there was an ectopic pregnancy, you know, pretty rare, but you can see that. So do you guys see how if the egg doesn't make it into the oviduct, it can get lost in your abdominal cavity, and sperm can just go out there anyway. Normally just break them down. White blood cells will eat them up, but you can have fertilization out there. But I think probably the most common ectopic pregnancy is a tubal pregnancy. So imagine the egg gets down the tube, gets fertilized, but then it gets stuck. You know, if you got scar tissue in there and the egg gets stuck in the tube somewhere, it'll start developing there. And all of a sudden you've got this fetus growing in your tube, and the tube is going to burst and bleed, and you can die, things like that. So you can have extreme pain, like kind of feels like an ovary pain. It could be an ectopic pregnancy that's begun. So yeah. And here you can even see there's other ones too, like, you know, it's not supposed to be down in the cervix, it's too low. And so that's going to be ectopic pregnancy. It's not going to make it inside the wall too much, you know. So a lot of things can go wrong, but ectopic is a pregnancy anywhere besides the normal lining of the uterus where it's supposed to be. And so women, you can see 85% by age 52. So it's pretty much like clockwork. Women go through menopause in the 40s and 50s. There's a really narrow kind of window. It's amazing that all women will, their ovulations will get more regular. And after a year of not having ovulations, we call that menopause. And you're not going to get pregnant. And all the eggs just degenerate, and you no longer have your period. There could be hormonal issues during that time. Hot flashes, things like that, can occur when women reach that point. Um, yeah, with menopause. In terms of evolution, why would a female live beyond reproductive years? I know it's great stuff, and yeah, and of course, geez, why do I say these things? And how do I just leave it there? I guess women beyond that can help their genes and evolution by helping their children and helping their grandchildren. So the idea that we have that we live to be 90, but we stop at like 40s and we stop having children and women, it seems uh, counterintuitive against evolution, which is having the most babies, right? Women over menopause can't have babies, and so yeah, but they can evolutionarily, of course, help their genes by helping their offspring and then their relatives. Yeah, and again, it's evolution. Talk about the worth of a human being based on having babies. Humans, we have other worths too, but just evolutionarily, it's interesting how we uh, women end their reproductive lives really in the middle of their lives. All right, so the uterus, we talked the fundus is the top part, then the body. Then we get to the cervix. And it's a real different spot down here. It's very rubbery, solid connective tissue. And it's a little opening in it that obviously can dilate during childbirth. That little opening is filled with mucus. And then during ovulation, that mucus gets watery so the sperm can make it up. And then it gets thick so nothing can make it up again. Birth control, a diaphragm is a like shower cap that goes right over it. This birth control you can put over it too, this ring that gives off hormones. And you can feel that cervix in the vagina. It's a round, rubbery thing, and it has you can go past it with it. The vagina goes past it, but it kind of sticks in different directions in different women. And you can apparently, during an autopsy or something, tell if the person had babies or not, because after you have children, it dilates so much, it has a little different look to it. Yeah. Yeah, so that's the look to it. If you look through the vagina, that's what the cervix would look like. It'd be round, and I say like rubbery, hard, and then has a hole in the middle. And usually a bunch of mucus in there. Yeah, and that mucus plug changes throughout your monthly cycles, and it turns watery and able to, nice for sperm to get through. And then the rest of the month, it's thick mucus that sperm couldn't get through. And it protects from bacteria and things getting up there. Yeah, exactly. So instead of being, your uterus is smooth muscle, lots of connective and elastic tissue, definitely. So it's thick, solid. And during childbirth, that collagen really breaks down. And because that cervix, which was so small and opening has to get big, and the whole cervix goes from solid to be much more flexible. So this happens towards childbirth. And you'll hear, right on TV shows, if you've been pregnant, people and everyone, how dilated are they? And that's how big, the opening of the cervix. And effaced is, I never know what that meant either. It has to do with you can see the cervix goes from being, more tubular to flattened out, and you're ready to give birth. The more effaced or thinner it gets, and the more dilated that cervix gets. Yeah. So I mentioned how during ovulation, that mucus that plugs up that hole in the cervix becomes very watery, easy for sperm to get through. And there's a lot of, interestingly, the vagina itself doesn't have really mucus glands in it, for lubrication, whatever, right? But all that fluid comes from the glands in the cervix. And there's glands at the opening of the vagina, but not along the vagina. So all this fluid will come from glands around the cervix that will come out. And a view of it, I don't need to get into too deep with you, but we'll talk about the vagina has stratified squamous, non-keratinized, and then the cervix in the outside has stratified squamous. You have friction, anything like that. And then as you get into the uterus, it turns into those columnar cells. So it's pretty dramatic when you look at slice through a cervix. Here's stratified squamous, same as the vagina. And then as soon as you get in, it turns into columnar. And then in the uterus is big columnar cells, right? Yeah. As you get older, interesting. Stratified squamous goes up further. Mm-hmm. Oh, look at that. Cool. Yeah, there's a big, dramatic change between stratified squamous and columnar cells. Look at that. Here's a little view, a little sagittal section, so you can see kind of a view from here. Looking sagittal section, you can see here's the vagina, and you can see there's like a little, they're called fornices that come on either side, and here's the cervix. Yeah, well, you can see the U.S. has much lower levels of cervical cancer than the world average because we have these Pap smears or Pap tests where I guess I think everything, is it yearly? I guess I don't know how often you're supposed to get this, but certainly if you're a woman, you're more aware of this. They will put they put like a brush in there and they get some cells off your cervix and they can look at them. And then people that are professionals at this can look at the cells and see if they're cancerous. And cervical cancer can be really slow growing. So you can catch this years in advance. And so that's the real benefit of this is if you have healthcare and you get regular Pap smears, you can catch it early and that's not gonna be able to spread. And so important health benefit of having regular healthcare. And usually this HPV virus is the big cause of cervical cancer usually. And so here here's normal. Again, you guys don't, professionals do this, but you can see different stages, how different it looks. So they can tell the cells, oh, I think I even show you. Yeah, like here's normal. So we see those are squamous cells. Looks like we see in the urine, the squamous cells floating around. And then here, these cells have huge nuclei. There's too many of them, so just showing you what they actually look for. If we were experts, we could look at it. Yep, so it's a test for early warning of cervical cancer, which can, grow for years. And if you can catch it, then you can do something about it. But if you don't ever get tested, then, you're just putting yourself to allowing it to grow and spread. All right, we're pretty much done with the uterus. We're really covering this well here. Vagina, all right. It means sheath. You can imagine putting a knife in the sheath, kind of, it's a sheath. And here it is, and you can see it's a muscular dead end tube. Yeah. If you get a hysterectomy, they'll remove, there's different ways to do it. If they remove the uterus, the vagina is in fact just a dead end street. But in a person with a uterus, there's actually opening there, and there's an opening. It's actually continuous, but yeah. So you can see it's sitting there behind the posterior to the urethra and in front of the rectum right there. Yeah. Fornices, yes, it's called the fornix. This is a posterior fornix, anterior fornix. Little areas on either side of where the cervix comes into the vagina. And so they can do a lot of abdominal surgeries that way. They, have you opened up and the speculum, and they can make an incision in the back of the vagina and get their tools in there. So you don't have to have any incisions like on the outside of your body. And then there's a connective tissue on the opening of the vagina called the hymen. Used to be thought, that shows you're a virgin if you have a complete hymen, but it's going to break anyway. But so if you don't have a hymen, doesn't necessarily mean anything about your sex life or anything like that. All right, so it is in fact a fibromuscular tube. So it's a smooth muscle along this tube that has ridges in it, and near the opening there's skeletal muscle, so you can control that near the opening. It's part of the pelvic floor, but otherwise it's smooth muscle up there. And when you have a baby, it's going to push it out, right? So that muscle's going to go. It's going to have stratified squamous, not keratinized. Yep. So stratified squamous, like we have on our skin, which allows friction to happen, things like that. But it's not waterproof like it is on our skin. It's like inside of our body. So inside of our mouth is stratified squamous, not keratinized. The vagina, the same thing. It's going to have the mucosa on the inside, like I say, stratified squamous. It's going to have muscles that are smooth except near the opening. And then it's going to have an outer connective tissue layer too. So here's this histological slide of vagina. Yeah, this is definitely stratified squamous. It doesn't have that keratin. Remember, it doesn't have that keratin up there. It's missing is mucus glands. I guess you guys didn't notice it's missing, but even if this was skin, you'd have sweat glands and sebaceous glands. Yeah, so the glands again that make the mucus are only up by the cervix and by the opening. Yep, there you go, stratified squamous. Here, yes, I'm going to tell you this. Now, the pH of the vagina is like 3, really acidic. And believe it or not, what happens is that you make glycogen, stored sugar, and then you have bacteria, commensal bacteria that live in the vagina that produce acid. So you actually encourage these bacteria to produce an acidic condition, because then other bacteria and yeast and things don't like that acidic conditions. And also in the semen, we had alkaline buffers that help buffer that acidity so the sperm can get through too. So yeah, a lot of interesting things going on here. Yeah, and lots of elastic fibers, because clearly giving birth, you gotta squeeze a head through that opening. So lots of elastic fibers, a smooth muscle has to relax and be able to push it out as well. All right, I think that's it. All right, external anatomy. Yes, I don't have male, female reproductive organs, kind of shocking, put out there, but just to be complete, to make sure we all know what's going on here. So obviously there's no scrotum, no penis, right? Because it's female. So what we have here, this mons pubis is there's a fat pad right on top of your pubis. In men and women, just a little more pronounced in women. It's called the mons pubis. It's fat on top of your pubic or pelvis bone right there. And then labia are the lips. And so the outer is labia majorum. And there's fat within it and hair on the outside of it, and protects this whole area, these labia majora. And then inside of it, there are the smaller hairless lips, the labia minora. So there's a majora and minora, smaller ones. And we call this region between the labia there, the vestibule. So the vestibule is going to have some openings, like the urethra, and the vaginal opening is in that vestibule. And there'll be little glands here. I talked about the mucus coming from the cervix, and there's these glands here that make a bunch of mucus. And they're homologous to the bulbourethral glands in males that produce mucus in the urethra of the penis. So here, the mucus comes out around the vagina and openings of these glands. So yeah, we're looking at the vestibule there between the labia, and the clitoris has a little called a prepuce, a little hood that kind of hides it right there. And that is erectile tissue, just like the penis. The only difference here is that the urethra doesn't go through it, right? The urethra opens separately right here. So the clitoris, the part that comes out, is called the glans. Just like the glans, penis is the head of the penis. And then if you looked dissected, you would see it has these two legs that go deep with erectile tissue. And during stimulation, same thing with erection in a male, this will fill up with blood, same way with the veins being cut off like that. And then if you remember the male, the corpora cavernosum, I don't know, I get into this too much, but there's erectile tissue on either side of the vagina. Inside there, there's these two bulbs on either side of the vagina too that fill up with blood as well. And the clitoris fills up with blood, like that. All right. And if this was a bird or a snake, you have one hole where all reproductive, urine, and digestive waste. Men have a urethra and an anus. Then women have a urethra, vagina, and an anus. So differences like that, right? Yes, and so the clitoris, the part that you see is really just a little bit. There's a hood or this prepuce that covers it. Just like the prepuce does the foreskin of the male, kind of covers it like that. And as you can see, if you could dissect and look in there, you'd see that it continues down into your body on either side of your pelvis with this erectile tissue that all can swell up. Oh, this does show the bulbs. Yeah, so this is erectile tissue. You don't see this because it's inside your body, but it also enlarges and it surrounds the vagina. Yeah. Yeah, so looking at external structures, the labia, and that labia majora, the lips on the outside, it's the same as the scrotum in the male. They just stay there. They don't come down, hold anything. There's just fat in there. Yeah. And then, of course, we did the internal organs first, the ovaries and the uterus and the vagina. All right. Another view looking at it, you can see clitoris, the hidden part, but here's the part you see that comes out. And here's the labia majora and minora, lips that kind of hide and go over the stuff in the vestibule. And again, the urethra opens here, vagina here, and anus over here. All right, helpful chart. I'll have some kind of multiple choice questions. Just make sure you know what does what. In terms of hormones, so we did this for the male, and in the male, this was going to be FSH was going to make the sperm develop, and then LH was going to like make those interstitial cells make testosterone. Okay, but here the FSH follicle stimulating hormone makes more sense. It's going to stimulate the follicles to make the eggs mature. And then the LH2 is going to be important in ovulation. So both of these are controlling. They come from the pituitary, but they're going to control the what the ovary is doing. And the hormones of the ovary control what the uterus is doing, right? Monthly. Wow, it's actually the hypothalamus. Your brain controls the pituitary gland. Pituitary hormones control what your ovary makes hormones. Those hormones control what your uterus does. Yeah. And additionally, those hormones from your ovary, the estrogens and progesterones, development of breasts and development of the female body where fat is put, and yes, all these things. Those hormones work for secondary sex characteristics like the breasts and things like that, and primary sex characteristics, talking about, you know, your eggs. All right, let's talk about breasts. Just an article about why, like I said, why human breasts are so large. All right, I know you're probably laughing at me now, but when you look at the animal world, humans are the only mammals that the breasts are always big or ready. Well, they're filled with fat in us. Like you look at most mammals, and their breasts only really come about for during times of feeding the young, and they make milk. But humans have disproportionately large breasts for their size that they hold fat all the time, and it doesn't seem to have any function. I don't really want to get into it all, but there's a book, The Naked Ape by Desmond Morris, and he hypothesized the way we have sex, and that it's females and other mammals, the buttocks, whatever, has the swelling. So maybe we move that to the front because we stand upright and all this is a sexual signal, maybe, but we don't really know why human breasts are always, they get larger obviously with lactation, but they're always they're bigger than they should be compared to most animals. All right, I embarrassed myself, but there we go. No, but you know mammary glands, because I talked about them when I did glands of the skin. They're in the skin, and it's the fat of the skin. And the glands, the mammary glands, are modified sweat glands. And so instead of making a certain kind of sweat, they make milk. Only when they're in the milk making phase, all right? Most of your life, I'm guessing a lot of you now, your breasts, the mammary glands are really reduced. The tubes are there, but the gland itself is tiny. They're just fat. But under the influence of hormones, these things can wake up and really change. And that's an idea why breast cancer is a real common cancer, is that it happens in cells that are changing a lot. And even monthly cycles, your breast can get tender and change a little bit. And so all this change, you know, is more likely to have cancerous effects as opposed to tissues that aren't changing that much. Anyway, but mammary glands, I talked about them already, they make, probably their first use was to put antibodies to the young, but then now in mammals, we make milk, you know, that's nutritious to feed the young as well. But yeah, it's within the adipose, you know, your skin has all this, the hypodermis has lots of fat, there's just lots of fat there. And it's above your pectoralis muscle, and you can move your breast, or in your skin, you can feel it move there's a connective tissue between the breast, the skin there, and between the muscle, and so there's movement there. It has these ligaments within it, these suspensory ligaments that kind of give it some shape, and then it's going to have these little lobules around it. That's next. Yeah, well, it doesn't really show it here, but almost like different segments, like 20 or so segments around it. And you can see here's the glands, and we'll call them mammary glands or alveolar glands. But if you look at the nipple, there's going to be little lactiferous ducts that are going to have the milk comes out of many different little holes around the nipple. And I guess basic gross anatomy, the nipple, you know what the nipple is, right? And then the areola is the darkened region around it in males and females. And after pregnancy, the areola darkens. Actually, we don't talk about pregnancy, but hormones cause darkening of the skin in many cases, and the nipples, the areola will darken. Maybe it's more of a target for the young to find that, to latch on. Yeah, so there you go. Fatty tissue on top of the pec major. And again, you know, in children, no difference, but then under the influence of estrogens, female breasts start growing, you know, beginning of puberty. And just, you know, night and day, this is the active breast tissue. Making milk, you know, making lots of protein and fats to make that milk. And then in the inactive breast, there's fat, connective tissue, and the glands are rudimentary. What hormone causes milk production? Oh yeah, you remember? Anterior pituitary, that was prolactin. But you guys remember milk ejection, right? So prolactin makes you produce milk, and then oxytocin. And then when there's suckling, when the breasts are stimulated, oxytocin will be released and the milk will be expressed. Muscles will contract and shoot that milk out. And prolactin comes to the pituitary, but it's interesting that the pregnancy actually sends hormones to block the prolactin from working. So you don't produce milk during pregnancy. Your breasts get bigger, they get ready. But then after childbirth, you no longer have those hormones. And then the prolactin really gets the milk going. Yeah, there we go. Let's take a look. Hormones before beginning of puberty. Yeah, and so in women, you'll have these female sex hormones that will begin the breast to grow. During pregnancy, yeah, so the duct system starts to grow, the breasts get bigger, the glands get bigger. So the placenta is going to secrete a hormone that's going to cause the breast to develop. Inhibits milk production until childbirth. So at childbirth, that placenta the placenta is gone. And so now the prolactin is gone wild. And so you start producing milk. And then oxytocin is going to cause it to be expressed. And if a woman doesn't breastfeed and there's no stimulation, the breasts will go right back. Well, I say go right back. They'll stop producing milk. Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, breast cancer. So obviously, you know, common. It's about 1% in men. So it's much like it can happen, but it's much less likely. So because women have all this breast tissue, and like I say, it's all this change. You can see how cancer could come about. And so we know a lot of study of breast cancer, and it's a big killer of women. And then you can see the importance. I'm just looking at the quadrants. There was some nonsense too, people saying that, you know, deodorants cause it because there's more, you know, tumors towards the armpit, but has been shown not to be the case. But correlation is not causation. All right. But breast exams, of course, you guys, just look for, you can look outside for dimples and then feel for any kind of irregularities. And again, many times there are breasts, as you get older, especially, you're going to have hardening of the breasts, and you'll feel cysts and things like that are not cancerous. But you want to get it checked out, and they can do a mammogram, or they can take a biopsy, and they can see if it's a fluid-filled kind of thing, then it's not cancer. But you worry that some of these ducts and some of these glands, they're always changing. They can start develop cancerous, and that can spread and go to bone and brain and everything else, right? Yeah. And mammograms, it's changed all the time. I think it's like when you're over 40 that want you to go yearly, or so that's obviously something keep in mind to get a regular mammogram, because some of these tumors are slow growing, and if you can excise it early, much better than waiting until the cancer has spread. I think the book said every woman has a 1 in 8 chance of getting breast cancer. Pretty sure. And clearly, your guys' age, it's 1 in 20,000 is the chance. But as you get older, you can see, I wonder if the 1 in 8 is only by age 55. Oh yeah, most people live past 85. Anyway, so that's the statistics are that, the longer you live, the more cell divisions, the more likely this cancer is to catch up with you. All right, let me try to think any more breast issues. And then with the breast cancer, it's, you guys interested in genetics, there's the BRCA gene, and there's various forms of it. But if you have this genetic condition, you're like 90% likely to get breast cancer. And so many women will preemptively have breast removed, a mastectomy, because it's a 90% chance. And you just have to, it's better to have your life than to have your, natural breasts. So, yeah. But a lot of study being done, on breast cancer. And so hopefully we understand it more and more and see there's a genetic component, nutrition component, possibly. So lots of things going on there. All right, well, let's finish this up. We'll talk about birth control. We'll talk about STIs. It used to be STDs, but it doesn't have to be a disease. You can be infected and not show any signs of a disease. All right, how's Maine doing? Are you New Hampshire people or Mass people? Oh yeah, all right. I think we're doing pretty good. Average, STD state rank. Look at Nevada. Is that Las Vegas? I don't know what that is. And a lot of the southern, it looks like the southern areas. Yeah. I don't know why I show this. I just kind of like, put ourselves in a perspective here. So, of course, these are sexually transmitted infections. You can have it respiratory transmitted, but this is sexually transmitted. So it's one way that these organisms, like COVID uses respiratory system, but gonorrhea uses, the uses the reproductive system. So most common, besides colds and flus, infections, around the world is spread in this way because humans have sex, and then that's one way that pathogens can be transmitted. Yeah, mostly viruses and bacteria, viruses, HIV or herpes or HPV, bacteria, chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis, things like that. Not a lot of protozoans I'm aware of. And some of them just will affect the sexual organs, and some others, like syphilis, untreated, can go to your brain and do all kinds of other bad things. And of course, a lot of infections are not symptomatic. You're carrying it, you don't know. And so that's an issue for spreading it, of course, if you don't know. And age-wise, half under 25-year-olds. Yeah, and again, I think you guys are aware of these. Did you learn this in health class? I don't know, you're just living your life, but most common is going to be chlamydia. Yeah, look at that. I'm looking at a number of cases here. Yeah, so chlamydia and gonorrhea are out there. And they're both bacteria, and painful urination, I don't know. But if you have them, you do a urine test, and they can diagnose it, and then you just get antibiotics, and then it's done. I mean, it's very easy to cure, but if you don't cure it, then you can spread it around. But just a few pills, and you can. We know how to kill these pretty well. And even syphilis. I mean, it sounds scary, syphilis, very medieval, but antibiotics. Yeah, we got it. So if you get, point is getting diagnosed, and then we've got the pills, antibiotics that kill these things really well. The viral things, so HIV and herpes and HPV, yeah, we don't have antibiotics for those because they're viral, right? HIV bounces the 80s, so we have a lot of drugs and people living much longer than it was. Much scarier back in the 80s than it is now. Of course, it's still scary, of course. Yeah, and then herpes or warts. There's some drugs, cyclovir, something like that. That's not to cure it, but they will just keep you from having outbreaks. But they live within your cells, the DNA. And so, unlike a bacteria, which lives outside our cells, we can get rid of it. Once it gets in your cells, it's hard to attack viral diseases like that. Yeah. Yeah, trichomonas is another bacteria that have antibiotics for. All right. Yes. Well, I sound so negative here. I mean, I've spent my life trying not to have a baby, right? That's what I think about. Well, not all the time, but I think about that. But if you want to have a baby, there's a lot of people out there, trying, and that they actually have real issues, for fertility. And if you want to, of course, you want to, for your woman, you want to know when your ovulation period is. So you can take your last menstrual cycle, about 14 days-ish, and you can, if you're trying, you can take your temperature and find there's a slight peak in temperature when you ovulate. And then you've got this like a couple day window. It's best to have sex, to get the sperm up there then. And if there's issues, you go to fertility clinics. You check the man and the woman to see, which is the sperm count the problem, or is it the ovaries are not ovulating, or your ducts aren't patent? So it's a whole medical field looking at fertility. And now they can do in vitro. You can have other people carry your baby. You guys know that. All right, contraception. I teach you guys. I hope you've had this before, but the idea of stopping pregnancy. Well, abortion is termination of a pregnancy, and so we'll not get into the whole people on either side of that, but it's a way to terminate a pregnancy, right? But contraception is a way. There's various levels we can go. So we spend a lot of time looking at, how do we prevent pregnancy and what's the best way to do it. And I talked about the male pill. It's tough. It's a little bit tougher because, oh God, this is so interesting. Like, do you trust the male AI to take the pill, all kinds of things. And, sperm production is at least a couple months, lag time. So you can't just like take it right away. Anyway, but let's take a look. So there's various ways you can do this. Stop the eventual birth. That is your goal. And so producing sperm. Yeah, so we're working at possibly stopping that. We don't have anything really good right now, but a vasectomy will keep the sperm. You'll produce sperm, but they will not make their way down the system. Cool. Now you're going to make eggs, but you can prevent them from ovulating with the pill, with hormones that prevent that ovulation. That works. All right, we're starting up high there, right? And then when I see abstinence, I think, well, yeah, that's a method of birth control. It's like saying my hobby is not skiing or not. That's from The Office, right? Or not stamp collecting. Yeah, well, obviously, yeah. But if you're having sex, how do you stop it? I think that's pretty obvious. You don't have virgin birth, right? All right. But here you can, if you stop the getting the sperm into the vagina with some kind of condom, or this pulling out technique, you can see is not very effective, but both these things will prevent the sperm from getting into the vagina. But let's say it does. Well, then you can, once it's in the vagina, you can have various spermicides to kill it once it's in there, or a diaphragm kind of blocks it from getting up into the cervix, into the uterus. So you can do that. On the other hand, you can see here, tubal ligation, you're actually going to ovulate, but the egg is not going to make it down the tube. That's cool. Yeah. So you can see that all these steps, you can intervene. And the morning after pill, looking down here, and there's new ones, all kinds of stuff coming out here, but those, if you, it's going to prevent ovulation, and immediately if you take that pill, yeah, there's different flavors of it. Anyway. Yeah, well, how effective are these? Well, if you don't use any birth control, for every 100 women in a year, 85 will get pregnant. So you can see some, even if you have sex, don't use any protection, all year long, you may not get pregnant. And some of these women that want to get pregnant can't. So you can see you're most likely to get pregnant if you have sex without any protection, because that's why we're here, right? Evolutionarily, right? And then looking down, condom, they talk about 2 to 5%. Pill 3%. So even these things that we think, oh man, I wore a condom or I'm taking the pill, there's still that, there's 97% chance, yes, it's going to work, but still that chance. Yeah. Oh yeah. So this is a particular kind of hormonal pills. The rhythm method is when you only have sex outside of that when you ovulate. And so if a woman keeps track of when she ovulates and doesn't have sex in like that week period around it, you're safer. Yes, but you can still see 20 out of 100, you will get pregnant. So sperm can last a long time. You can miscalculate, lots of things can happen. And then withdrawal or coitus interruptus. Yeah. 4 to 18%, 4 to 18 out of 100. Yeah. But tubal ligation and vasectomy, less than 1%, big time. And, these are all have to be some kind of mistake was made in the procedure, because you shouldn't be able to get pregnant. Oh, this is an IUD. You can put a device within your uterus that prevents implantation. So fertilization happens, sperm and egg are made, they meet, but it just doesn't implant. All right, and this shows the tubal ligation of vasectomy again. You don't lose any sex drive or any hormonal differences because the blood vessels are still attached. The blood vessels are still attached, right? It's just that the tubes that carry the sex cells are not no longer together. Oh, look at that. And again, it's cool to teach about this reproduction, but we don't have time to go into the whole chapter about from this point on, looking at fertilization and pregnancy and birth and the whole chapter on genetics. So yeah, you get that in other classes too. So, all right. 3 lectures on reproductive. The book has more detail than you need. You're going to notice that. So I want you to listen to my lectures, look at my PowerPoints, and these are the questions I will ask you. All right. And not that there is a lot. I know there's a lot, but I've winnowed it down to what I think are important things for you guys to know taking an A&P class in reproduction. All right. I'm glad I'm seeing you guys still. And that's it for now.